Oh, come on. All right, here we go. 1, 2, 3. All right. So tomorrow at 11 a.m., the fiery furnace people, will you be ready? You have all of this evening to prepare. So we want you to knock our socks off, right? Just be amazed at how the fiery furnace works for you guys. All right. Have you had a chance to read Daniel chapter 1 or no? Some? Who has read it? All right, we got all the goodies here. So open your Bibles to Daniel 1. Or your phones or iPads. For me, I will be reading from the New International Version. All right. And I'm turning my iPad to Do Not Disturb, and my phone I think I should turn to Do Not Disturb. Do Not Disturb is on. All right. All right. So when Jeannie and I lived in the San Diego area, we lived in, a tract home area in Escondido. Anybody know where Escondido is? There we go, a couple, yeah. And we had some new neighbors move in a few houses away from us, so I went over there. They were moving in. I went over there to say hi and introduce myself. I noticed that the guy was really built. I mean, he was muscles on muscles and really short hair. And when I shook his hand, he was firm and big. And I said, hey, welcome to Summer Creek. He said, thank you, sir. And I detected a Southern accent. And so his wife was there with him, a little girl. And I said, a little preschool girl with him. And I said, so where are you guys from? And he goes, she says, with an even thicker accent, we just moved here from Hawaii. And I went, no, I mean, it's obvious you're not from Hawaii. Where are you from? And she goes, oh, we're from Alabama, up near Huntsville. And their accent gave them away. And I wished them, happy moving in. I didn't volunteer to carry anything heavy or anything because I'm not that service-minded, but I could tell they weren't from. They were moving in, and they weren't from where they said they were from. Same is true for us. We are not. We're from here. I'm not Hawaii. We're from this world, but our citizenship is where? In heaven. We have dual citizenship, if you might think of it that way. This world isn't our home, and Daniel understood that from a very young age. In fact, in this very first chapter, we get introduced to how much integrity he has, how much insight he had, even as a 14 or 15-year-old guy. Right? So let's start with how Daniel 1 starts. Okay, in the third year of the reign of King Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and seized it. And the Lord delivered Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, along with some of the articles from the temple of God. These he carried off to the temple of his God in Babylonia and put in the treasure house of his God. The king ordered Ashpenaz, chief of his court officials, to bring into the king's service some of the Israelites from the royal family and the nobility, rich kids, young men without any physical defect, handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, well-informed, quick to understand, and qualified to serve in the king's palace. He was to teach them the language and literature of the Babylonians. The king assigned them a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table. They were to be trained for 3 years, and after that, they were to enter the king's service. All right, so that's how Daniel begins. Not with very good news. So that 3 years after after Nebuchadnezzar after Jehoiakim had become king, Jehoiakim had relied in political alliances and subjugated his own position as God's king over Israel to become a vassal, V-A-S-S-A-L, of Babylon, which meant Babylon would extract a payment from them in order for them to not come in and just wipe them out. So he was paying these guys protection, basically. But in his third year, he must have ticked somebody off because Babylon came in and conquered them. So what we have here is retribution. God promised that if the kings of Israel were to be unfaithful, that he would give them over to other nations. In fact, his promise was in Leviticus 26, if you want to look it up, but I don't want to take the time. But God gave. Notice how the Bible puts it. In the third year of King Jehoiakim, Nebuchadnezzar attacked Jerusalem, attacked Israel, and God delivered. God gave them over to the Babylonians. It wasn't that Babylon was stronger. This was part of God's plan. God gave them to him. He gave over the king of Judah. Jehoiakim ceased to exist. He gave over some of the treasures from the temple, the very holy items from the Holy of Holies, the things that were most valuable in the whole nation. He gave over to the Babylonians, and he gave over the cream of the crop of a young generation. The cream of a crop of these guys. But I don't want you to miss the point. God did it. Nebuchadnezzar didn't do it. God gave these things over to Nebuchadnezzar. So these young men were deported. They were taken without their consent. They're probably just 150 young guys, maybe 14 to 15 years old. From the noble class. The royal family, the noble, these were the sons and daughters of senators and House of Representative people. These were the best of the best. They had the best upbringing, the most potential. They had the best opportunities given to them. And these are the guys that Nebuchadnezzar initially took from Israel. Very smart on his part to assimilate the brightest and best from a conquered nation into his own nation, so that it would be his nation would get the best of what a conquered nation would give, and that best were these young guys. There were probably like 150 of them, probably no more than 14 or 15 years old, and handsome, smart, confident, capable. The best of the best from that nation. They were the best. And this is where, so here's Jerusalem, you see it? And then there's Babylon. They didn't go straight across from Jerusalem to Babylon. Why do you think that would be? It's desert there. So what they did is they followed what's called the Fertile Crescent. Have you ever heard that? Fertile Crescent, sometimes it's called the cradle of civilization. They would have taken the more indirect route, going up and around the Fertile Crescent, down into the Tigris and Euphrates Valley, into Babylon. So they were a long away from home. They would never see Jerusalem or their home country again. They were captives. God gave it. When they got there, they were reprogrammed. They were brainwashed in a sense. They were given, where am I here on this thing? They were given new identities. Daniel was no longer known as Daniel. He was known as Belteshazzar, which means Bel, or a different word for Marduk, protect the king. Marduk was Babylon's main deity. He was a violent, strong monster of a guy, and he was Babylon's guy. When I was in 8th grade in history class, my history teacher had a big, long paddle like this, 2x4-ish kind of thing with holes drilled in it so you could swing it faster, and it had Marduk engraved in it. I always think of that paddle when I think of Marduk. So Daniel was given the new name Belteshazzar. His friend Hananiah, which means Yahweh is gracious, was given Shadrach, or inspired of Anu, which is another of the gods. Mishael, which means who is what God is. In other words, there's nobody like God. Mishael became Meshach. Sounds similar, belonging to Marduk. And Azariah became Abednego. Yahweh has helped turn into servant of Nego, which is another of the Babylonian deities. Their identity was wiped. They were given a brand new identity. Can you imagine the confusion that must have been going on during that time? Can you imagine if you arrived here and you were no longer allowed to be called by your own name, you were given a different name? Yeah, it just must have been amazing. Probably 150 guys went through this process. There's an image of Marduk killing some sort of monster guy. The guy on the right is Marduk, and everything about him is symbolic. The spear on his side, the trident kind of thing in his hands, his wristwatch. I don't know what their wristwatch is, but I don't think they had wristwatches. It may be a sundial. So they were put into a 3-year training for their reprogramming. They were to learn the language and the literature and learn all about the culture and adopt the culture of Babylon. It was a complete reprogramming of who they were, their identity, and where they belonged. They were absorbed into Babylonian culture. Now, one of the things that happened next, oh, by the way, I was wondering as I wrote this up, how is the same thing happening in our world? And I'm not talking about taking people captive and reprogramming them and giving them new names, although human trafficking is a really tragic thing. But how is this happening in our world? I know the Russians are doing it to Ukrainian kids that they capture and ship up north into Russia. But for you and I, how is our world trying to reprogram us? Yeah.
Social media is like kind of reprogramming kids' brains into thinking that certain things about people are making them want what they see other people having.
That's true, yeah. Social media, yeah.
Some people look to like YouTubers as idols and trying to go thinking, hey, I can do this too. I can look at a camera and just be funny.
And some people can, but they call those people what? Influencers, yeah. Somebody got that one. Somebody figured that out. Influencers they do have a huge influence. Normally it's fairly benign. I use this makeup, or I use this protein powder to build my muscles, or whatever they're trying to influence. But a lot of the influencing happens just from the vibe of what you can see and what you can watch. TikTok is amazing for its ability to influence styles and the way you should look, the way you should smile, how sexy you should be, how you should move, and all that kind of stuff. Our sites, yeah. And music can be an influence. It can, the lyrics of songs can really tell you, you learn a lot about what love is, or if you're into hip hop, what retribution and revenge is all about, or pride, or, that kind of stuff. Our world is trying to reprogram us at every moment. So we have to be careful of what we absorb and what we adopt. That's not from where we're from. All right? So, the way to oh yeah, I asked that thing. Notice how well rehearsed I am on my slideshows. Okay, so so in verses 8 through 14, Daniel and his 3 friends do some resistance. Let me read it for you. But Daniel, this is after making a point that they were the king had assigned them a daily amount of food and wine from his own table. But Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine. And he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself in this way. Now God had caused the official to show favor and compassion to Daniel. But the chief official said to Daniel, I'm afraid of my lord, the king, who has assigned your food and drink. Why should he see you looking worse than the other young men your age? The king would then have my head because of you. Daniel then said to the guard whom the chief official had appointed over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Notice they were using their Israeli names. Please test your servants for 10 days. Give us nothing but vegetables and water. Then compare our appearance with that of the young men who eat the royal food, and treat your servants in accordance to what you see. So he agreed to this and tested them for 10 days. At the end of 10 days, they did look healthier and better nourished than any of the young men who ate the royal food. So the guard took away their choice food and the wine they were to drink and gave them vegetables instead. All right, let's stop there and take a look, see what we can think about this kind of thing. Where am I on my notes? So Daniel decided that he's not going to, so they decided he's going to maintain a dual identity. He's going to adapt and adopt what he can from the Babylonian culture, but there's a line he's not going to cross. He's going to remain a faithful Israeli guy. So by asking for a way out of defiling himself with the food, he shows his continued dependence upon God. If he had gone along with the program and had, because these guys are smart and talented, had risen and succeeded, who would have gotten the credit for his success? Babylon would have. But by drawing a line and saying, I'm going to remain faithful, if he succeeds, then God gets the credit, not the dominant culture. So, by doing so, he shows continued dependence on God himself. A quote from one of the books I used in researching this says, they were in the process of their education and preparation for service. Their minds, as well as their bodies, were being fed by the Babylonian court. If they prosper, then to whom should they attribute their development and success? And they're Babylonians. However, by refusing to eat the king's food, they know it's not the king who is responsible. So, this decision could not have been an easy one to make. The king himself had ordered this menu. He must have been some sort of interested in dietary kind of stuff. So, where am I on my notes? I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm way up here. All right. So Daniel resolved not to defile himself. That word means to make a decision and settle it in your heart. It becomes a firm commitment. It's similar to a vow that we make when we get married. It's an unbreakable decision that we make. Resolved. He resolved himself not to defile himself with the king's food. Why do you think the king's food would defile himself? What about the king's menu would be a problem for a Jewish guy? What?
It's probably unclean.
Unclean. It might have been unkosher, maybe. And there was probably pig involved, pork and stuff. But that may be one reason. Any other ideas that might? Yes, it would probably. The king's food was always offered to an idol, and kind of the way we bless a meal before it, in a way of acknowledging the idol's sovereignty. And we say thank you for this stuff, and then they take it and feed it. So by eating the food, you would be acknowledging the position of that deity. So he decided, I can't do that. He resolved that he wasn't going to defile himself. And it couldn't have been an easy decision because the king himself had made it. And kings, in that era were especially violent in meting out their punishment. So Daniel comes up with an alternative solution. He goes to the principal of the school and says, "Hey, can I not have this food and drink this wine? Can we somehow figure out a way?" He goes through the chain of command. He goes to the guy in charge first. Now where am I? Oh, I'm going to back up. This decision may not have been an easy one. And I was thinking about this today. They're far away from home. Nobody at home is going to find out if they get this food and drink this wine. Nobody at home is going to know that they're going against the dietary laws of Judaism. Also, there's like 150 guys from Israel who's in this crew. And 146 of them are going along. So peer pressure must have been intense. Let's see, what else did I think of? Oh yeah, the quality of the food was great. And, the alternative, vegetables and water, was not going to be great. And besides, it would be natural to think, hey, God has not protected us. We are captives, and God did not come through and protect us. Why should we continue to follow him? Being a Christian just doesn't work. Why should I keep following God? Have you ever talked to somebody who says, I tried that Jesus thing and it didn't work? I have. But it's not really what was going on, was it? Because God gave all this. God had a greater purpose for what Daniel and his friends were going to experience. So it couldn't have been a difficult situation. So the first try was to go to the school principal and say, can we find another way around this? And the school principal says, yeah, Daniel, I like you. Notice God gave the principal a good opinion of Daniel, a willingness to help. God did that. That wasn't Daniel being a nice guy. It was a supernatural thing that God did on Daniel's behalf. But even with that, the principal said, sorry, I'd like to keep my head attached to my neck. Not going to do it. So then Daniel goes to the next in line, to their teacher. Oh, I found this picture. Does that look like Jerry Seinfeld saying, no, I don't want to have this food? The first try is asked at the school principal. He says, no way, Jose. Second try, a foolproof plan presented to their teacher. Now, these guys were breaking down into groups, and these 4 guys, they were probably in a dorm situation, 4 to a room. These 4 guys had a teacher over them. So Daniel went to their teacher and said, gave them the alternative plan. 10-day diet, food, vegetables and water. 10 days, that's all we're asking. And if you don't see a difference, if we don't look even better than everybody else in 10 days, then we'll see what happens after that. So he gave him a foolproof plan, and then said at the end of it, take a look at how we look, and judge us by the other guys, and then act accordingly. So the teacher said, sure. So let's find out what happened. Verse 15 through 21. At the end of 10 days, they looked healthier and better nourished than any of the young men who ate the royal food. So the guard took away their choice food and wine that they were to drink and gave them vegetables instead. So can you imagine? Have you ever been on a 10-day diet? I have several times, and they never work. You can't do much change in a human body in 10 days, But these guys were evidence that their diet had made them look better. Do you think it was vegetables and water that made them look better? I don't think so, because that's just not physically possible. All right, so after 10 days, God made their bodies look better than their compatriots. So the reward, it worked. And it wasn't just one-off. It wasn't just a 10-day diet. They were saying, okay, from now on, for the next 3 years, vegetables and water. Would you be willing to live on vegetables and water for 3 years to honor God? Whew. Can you imagine their commitment? I mean, after like a couple of weeks, I'm thinking, oh, okay, give me a hamburger. I need something. I need some protein here.
Well, technically, vegetables have protein, but I get it. Meat has fat, and meat has fat.
Well, yeah. I remember talking to somebody about protein in vegetables. They were saying these bean sprouts, they have more protein per ounce than beef does. And I'm going, well, if that's true, how many bean sprouts do you have to equal a 1-pound steak? A bucket of them. It's much easier to get protein from protein sources than it is from vegetables. So it wasn't just a one-off. And once again, we get this phrase, God gave. Let's read the next few verses. To these 4 young men, God gave knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and learning. And Daniel could understand visions and dreams of all kinds. Notice how these guys got smarter because God made them smarter. That just blows my mind. When I first discovered this, I really thought, oh man, I wish God would make me smarter. I wish I had something I could stand up for and let God work in me and make me smarter, but he hasn't done that yet. I'm still not smart. But he gave them knowledge and ability in language, literature, math, science, all that kind of stuff. I don't know about you, but I'm not a numbers guy. Are you a numbers person? Do we have numbers people in here? People are good with numbers. There we go. I'm not good with numbers. Don't give me money to take care of. I just don't know. I just don't figure it out. But I'm good with words. I'm a better writer than I am a speaker, but I can understand concepts and put them in the right words. But God gave these guys the ability to understand it all. Literature, the wisdom literature, the astronomical literature, all that stuff. They just learned it all. They were at the top of their class. Now let's see what happens when they get to graduation. In verse 18 through the end of the chapter, at the end of the time set by the king to bring them into his service, notice that their job, their training was to make them government employees. And how well they did in school determined what kind of job they got. If you did really poorly, you're a garbage collector. If you did great, you might be right in the room where the king is, among his advisors. So, at the end of the time set by the king to bring them into his service, the chief official presented them to Nebuchadnezzar. The king talked with them. Can you imagine? That's like being in the White House talking to the president about a job you're hopeful to get. The king talked to them, and he found none equal to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Notice the Israeli names. So they entered the king's service. That doesn't mean they just joined the governmental employees. They are in the king's service. In every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king questioned them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters in his whole kingdom. Wow, that's amazing. So God gave these guys extreme talents and skill and information and ability to learn. So in their final exams, the king spoke with them, and they stood out from everybody else. And they were 10 times better. And the last verse of this chapter said, and Daniel continued, he remained there until the first year of King Cyrus, which is a great way to end this first chapter, because this is when they're now 18, 17 years old, and they're entering the king's service, and it says, and Daniel kept on serving. He continued in the king's service until King Cyrus of the Medo-Persian Empire. So Daniel continued. So whenever I start writing down something I want to teach, I write 2 words at the top of my page. It's the question that everybody that I'm going to be talking to is wondering. They may not think it out loud, think it in these words or even out loud, but everybody's wondering, well, so what? That's the question I have to answer. So here's the so what. Preserve your dual identity in this world. Somehow remain faithful as a Christian and as a member of this society. We don't withdraw from it, we engage with it as Christians. Maintain your dual identity. Be aware of culture's influence on you, and celebrate our Kingdom of God citizenship with other expatriates. You know what an expatriate is? Somebody who's moved from another country to another one. Those guys, Daniel and his friends, they were expatriates. Have you ever been in Boston for St. Patrick's Day? The Irish people in Boston celebrate St. Patrick's Day with far more energy than anybody in Ireland does, because they're away from Ireland. They're celebrating their heritage. Or, in Southern California, Americans celebrate Cinco de Mayo, thinking it's like Mexico's 4th of July. It's not. It's not Mexico's 4th of July. It's just the date of a minor battle in one of Mexico's wars. So, but Mexicans love, and Hispanics, people from Guatemala and all those Latin American countries celebrate their heritage more here than they do in their own homes or in their own home countries. And preserve biblical knowledge and perspectives throughout your engagement with the culture, like Daniel did. Next is, you never have to deny your faith. There's never a point where you must capitulate, where you must go along. As 1 Corinthians something says, 1 Corinthians I don't even have it written down here. I thought I did. It says, God will, with every temptation, provide a way of escape. In our escape rooms, there's no single puzzle or code that you have to find to escape the room. It's a series of clues and puzzles and actions that you do that finally result in an escape. And it's, as you can see in Daniel and Hananiah and Mishael and Azariah's case here, it was a series of things they had to go through to find the way of escape. Often, we have to go through that kind of series of things to remain faithful. You never have to deny your faith. There's always a way of escape. So determine, like Daniel did, to stay pure and then act under conviction and get creative when you're faced with roadblocks. That's what we can learn from Daniel. All right? So there you go. We're out early. And you can work on your skits, or you can go take a break and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Can you go back to the last slide really fast?
Yep. Oh. I think I had some more, but I'll just show it to you. Okay. And there's this one too. God will come through. Oh, okay. You're welcome. All right. Have a good evening, you guys.